He has worked in the IT industry the past decade, riding the startup roller coaster on a daily basis. As a founder and partner at SpeedInvest, he aims to build a bridge between Europe and Silicon Valley. Please welcome to the stage, Mr. Michael Schuster.
Hello, everyone. Wow, what an entry. You know that James Hetfield from Metallica almost burned himself in one of those, so I was kind of happy to stay backstage for a little more while. So, how is everyone? That's a pretty strong sign, I have to say. I'm asking again, how is everyone? That's much better. I know, it's after lunch. It's probably the dead zone of every conference, so I'm trying my best to give you some entertainment here, talking about evolution. But first, the boring stuff. Why am I here? You're asking yourself this. Well, I guess because we invested in a ton of companies, like over 50 in the past 4 to 5 years, all of them in CEE. And yeah, jointly they're doing something around 70 million revenue and raised 130 million follow-on funding. So I guess that's the reason why someone thought it might be an idea to get my opinion on how to fundraise or fund startups in CEE. And I'm trying to do exactly that. And now, why is this guy talking about evolution? I'm going to tell you in a minute, but let me ask you a couple of questions first. So, who here in this room has a startup? Hands up. Hands up, okay. And who is currently fundraising? Okay, there's a bunch of people. Who is an investor? Okay, now the startup guys, these are your guys, right? Investors, hands up again? No, just kidding. So, and who in this room, second to last question, who in this room believe that God made all of this? No one? One, there's one over there. Who believes in evolution? That's more people. That's a good thing. And I tend to agree. Now, the one thing I'm putting this talk around evolution is basically because I think startups are very much like looking at something like this cute baby cat over there, which is a Eurasian lynx, and it was almost extinct a while ago. But it didn't. You know, it's not a dinosaur. It survived. And that's very much what you need to do with your startups most of the time. You just need to survive. Because there might be a time where you're the predator or the prey, and then tides may turn, seasons change, there's a, ice coming up or something, and everything's different. And that's what I'm trying to look at. So why are some companies surviving for hundreds of years? Why are some companies not surviving? And what's actually the quality you have to have as a startup to make it into something like Siemens or IBM, right? That are around for hundreds of years. I mean, of course, it helps that they're pretty big, right? So there's a lot of things that you can survive, but that's the question. And Charles Darwin put it very nicely. It's not selection that is actually the key, but it's looking at those that are most responsive to change. So we're not trying to find the best startups, but we're trying to find the founders that can deal best with change, that are most responsive to it. Now, if you have a startup, or you worked in the VC industry, or you're looking at this topic, you might have seen something like this. It's a nice graph that shows the ideal world of startup funding, where, of course, you start off with friends, fools, and family, and some angels that you might find, and then you go through a series of rounds. Graph is always up and to the right, until you, at one point, IPO. Well, it would be nice if it was that way. What we've seen, it's much more like that. So you start off with some angels, grants, whatever. Then you got your first, what the fuck, OMG moment. You're almost dying. And then you're not. And then, you're maybe break even for the first time, make a couple of euros. But then it goes down again. You do seed round after seed extension, after bridge, after convertible. So you're basically going a long way. And then, at some point, it works out. It clicks, which is the most exciting moment that I've ever seen with startups, when suddenly the product and the market, they just click, they work together, it all goes up and to the right, till that moment where for all of a sudden, and you don't know why, it doesn't go up and to the right again. So you're back to square one. But I've also seen a lot of startups that then again make it and grow and get huge companies, and that's when really exciting things happen. And what I want to share with you is 5 things that we've seen in the last years that frequently puzzle us and maybe help some of you survive or adapt to change in a way. And I'm trying to make this as entertaining as possible. One thing, please keep your fairy dust. I don't know if you came across this, but my feeling as a VC is, so we see tons of companies, we see thousands of companies a year actually, and what we see is that there's a time for everything. So about 4 or 5 years ago when we started, it was mobile. Everything was mobile. Then everything was user-generated, location-based. That was actually the best combination, mobile, user-generated, location-based, right? Those were the mobile services of that days. Then along came big data. Big data, like huge data. Nobody had the data, but everyone was after the big data stuff. Because someone heard, you know, VCs, they're funding this big data thing, right? So let's just put big data in. I mean, eventually we'll have huge amounts of data, right? That's the fairy dust of, I'd say, last year. Machine learning. I've never seen so many machine learning startups like last year. Not all of them use actual machine learning. And, you guessed it, AI. Everything's AI, right? Everything is artificial, everything is intelligent, and then at some point you figure out it's basically just plain statistics. But yeah, so it is a nice way to build a company, and it's definitely cool to be on the technological edge, but if you're not like that super scientist that really uses AI, just don't put it in your slide deck. Just don't mention it everywhere, because it will not get you funded, right? It will maybe draw some attention, but sooner or later, someone will dust off that little fairy dust. Second thing that is always striking to me, valuations are actually prices. So you would never pay the same price in China for a Big Mac that you're paying for it in USA. And still, there's people coming to us with a TechCrunch article, fortunately they're not printing it out, telling us, hey, but that's a similar startup in the US and they got double the valuation. So we actually think we can get that valuation too. And we're always saying like, yeah, try it, right? There's nothing wrong with trying it. We wish you all the best luck. But in fact, you have to understand this in an industry that prices, and it's less about value, right? It's less about whether the Big Mac in China tastes any better than the Big Mac in the USA. It's more about what is the price of the ecosystem and the place that you actually started your company in. And it's a matter of fact, prices or valuation in CE will be definitely lower. And then another thing we've frequently seen, and that's probably something for people who are in this industry, but I'm trying to put it as easy as possible. So if you go through an accelerator or you take some initial funding, a very interesting strategy is that a lot of founders go out and they say, okay, let's not agree on valuation right now. Let's just push this off to some future moment where magically we'll all agree that 10 million is the right valuation. So what they do, they take out a loan called a convertible, and they set a cap, so an upper limit to the valuation, because investors are not stupid. They want to actually have some sorts of knowledge what the valuation is going to be after a while. The problem is, it's the same with pricing, right? That's the thing that you all do on your pricing pages. You put it up like Basecamp does here. You have the plus plan, most popular, it's in the middle. That's what you call price anchoring. You're trying to tell people that's the most favorable plan, and that's the price you should be actually paying. So if you're paying less, you're probably not getting the best value out of it. And if you're paying more, you're sort of our power user. So you're set an anchor. And those caps, they're actually doing the same. They're setting anchors for future rounds, and they're not always beneficial, because just because you think the valuation should be there, the market might think differently. Number 3, sales, sales, sales. Sounds stupid, but it's something we frequently see. If you walk into any startup in CE, chances are high there's one sales guy, if at all. So who in this room does sales? Okay, there's a couple of them. Usually it's the founder. It's the one that draws the shortest straw, or it's the guy from business school, right? Because he can't program, he can't design, so he's the sales guy. And there's 10 developers, 15 developers, and they're always hiring developers. And then basically, nobody does the sales. Fact is, if you look up on AngelList, there's as many sales and marketing jobs that companies look for as developer jobs. And that's the main difference. They fucking sell their shit. They fucking sell their shit. That makes a big company. Big companies are not built by hundreds of developers. They're actually built by making revenue. It's as easy as that, and I have to say it still. USA, the promised land, picture of Silicon Valley when it was still an orchard with oranges and everything. Looks a bit different now. Everybody wants to go there for good reasons. There's a lot of fundraising happening, a lot of companies. And you most likely will think, well, we're going to do sales there. So we hire a VP of sales that will magically grow our revenue in the US, right? Chances are high this is your first VP of sales. He's roadkill. Because you got an organization in Europe and a guy in the US, he's on his own, trying to sell a product that is rarely sellable, and he's your second sales guy, right? And then you're frustrated that you're burning through, I don't know, half of your investors' money with one guy, and he doesn't bring in any revenue. I'd say, management of expectations. So, going to the US is not founding an Inc., it's much more. Fundraising in the US without an Inc. and a team there doesn't work, forget it. There's rare cases, yes, but those are high growth cases or super cool tech startups that have something that only a few companies have. And what we've learned, consider going to YC, Y Combinator, or Techstars later in your life cycle than you actually think. Most of the companies go there too early and they figure out 3 months, it's nothing, it's over like this, we didn't achieve anything, we didn't fundraise. It was just a waste of time. CEO was there, nothing happened back home, and everybody's unhappy. And then number 5, everybody in this room who's looking for funding, I bet you is chasing the big guys. The Indexes, the Excels, the Andreessen Horowitz, but they get tons of startups. In fact, they probably get every fucking startup on the planet. And you're just talking to them because you know their names. But there might be a lot of investors out there that are actually much better suited for you and that will actually call back because they know about your industry and they can add some value. And one last thought. So I think the VC model, as it is, the standard VC model that is actually chasing unicorns who are extinct for good reasons, is broken, especially in the CE. And I'm going to tell you why, because it's skewed toward extreme returns. You need to build billion-dollar companies so that the guys putting money into a startup actually earn some money. And that's a problem, right? Because we neither have the companies that will acquire you, nor do we have an IPO market that will help you put your company on the stock market. And Europe is much more difficult to sell than to a combined market in the US with 280 million people. So I think it needs a different model, and that's what we're here for, trying to build a different model in an industry that, funnily enough, is funding disruption, but hasn't been disrupted in a long while. And I'm leaving you off with a text around evolution from Pearl Jam, and inquire all of you, do the evolution, baby. Thank you.